The conference room froze. Eliza had poured her heart into weeks of work, yet her boss leaned back and dismissed her with a single sentence. "You're just not leadership material." Those words didn't just wound her pride, they rewrote her identity. Echoing louder than applause ever could, Eliza was never the loudest voice in the room. She didn't come from privilege, nor did she carry the shine of an Ivy League degree. What she carried was hunger, raw, stubborn, unshakable hunger. While others dragged themselves into the office half awake, she was already there, pen in hand, chasing ideas that kept her up at night. Her desk was a battlefield of notebooks filled with strategies, solutions, dreams, yet no one leaned over to ask what she was working on. Her papers stayed untouched, her words unheard. To them, she was just another face in the background. But to herself, Eliza was building something far bigger than the job description they chained her to. She didn't know it yet, but every unnoticed page was sharpening her for a fight she couldn't avoid. He sat high above the office floor, glass walls framing his corner office like a throne. His presence filled the space even when he wasn't speaking, the kind of authority that could silence laughter with a single glance. The men admired him, joked with him, called him Sir. Eliza? He barely looked at her. He never once spoke her name. She was the assistant, the note-taker, her. Every time she raised her hand in meetings, his gaze drifted past her, searching for another man's opinion. It wasn't anger that burned inside her, it was something colder. The feeling of being unseen, of having her brilliance buried under layers of indifference. Day after day, she watched her ideas die in silence, while her boss polished the egos of those around her. To him, she was invisible. To her, that invisibility was slowly becoming unbearable. The conference table became her battlefield. Eliza came armed with notes, charts, late-night research that could push the company forward. But the moment her lips parted, the room changed. Her boss leaned back, his eyes drifting as if her words were nothing more than background noise. She watched men beside her repeat the same thoughts minutes later, only to be applauded as innovators. Her ideas were swallowed whole, repackaged and celebrated, while she sat in silence, her name erased from her own work. Each dismissal was a knife that carved away at her confidence, yet also sharpened her resolve. She didn't want praise, she wanted to be heard. But in that office, her worth was invisible, locked behind walls built by her boss's indifference. Still she stayed. Still she fought, because deep down Eliza knew her ideas weren't small. It was their vision that was. The office was nearly empty, the kind of silence that hums through fluorescent lights. Eliza stayed behind as always, tying loose ends while others hurried home. That's when she heard it, laughter drifting from the corridor. She froze. Her boss's voice carried through the thin walls soaked with arrogance. Promotion for her. She should be grateful we even keep her around. The words cut deeper than any silence ever had. Gratitude? For crumbs? For invisibility? Eliza's hands trembled as she packed her bag, but it wasn't sadness that spilled over. It was fury. In the bathroom mirror, she saw her reflection blurred by tears, yet her jaw was clenched like steel. That night she didn't cry because she was weak. She cried because she was done being underestimated. Each tear was fuel, each sob a vow. Sitting alone on the bus ride home, she whispered to herself, almost like a promise to the night. One day, he'll remember my name. That was the night her pride shattered, but it was also the night something stronger began to take shape inside her. Eliza lay in the dark, the hum of the city faint beyond her window. The words of her boss still rang in her ears, replaying like a cruel song. She should be grateful we keep her. Her chest tightened, but this time there were no tears. Only silence, only rage. She stared at the blank ceiling above her bed, feeling the weight of years she had given to a man who never once believed in her. And then, out of that silence, she whispered a sentence that would change everything. I'll prove you wrong. It wasn't just defiance. It was ignition. The betrayal that was meant to break her had instead awakened something deeper. Their flame of hunger, a refusal to be invisible. That night, Eliza stopped waiting for permission. She stopped chasing a nod from a man in a glass office. She didn't know how, she didn't know when, but she knew she would rise. And when she did, the world would not only hear her name, it would never forget it. Sleep became a luxury Eliza could no longer afford. The moment she finished her long shifts, She didn't collapse into bed. She opened her notebook. Pages that once held ignored company reports were now filled with her own vision. She sketched late into the night, her pen racing across the paper as though it couldn't keep up with her mind. It wasn't just a business she was designing. It was a rebellion, a space where women's voices would be amplified, not silenced, where ideas weren't laughed at but funded, where someone like her would never again be made to feel grateful for scraps. The lamp on her small desk cast shadows across her tired face, but behind those shadows was fire. Her boss's dismissal became the blueprint for her dream. Every sneer, every stolen idea, every glazed stare, she turned them into fuel. Eliza wasn't just planning a company. She was building a revolution. One sketch at a time, rejection was transforming into power. By day, Eliza was still the overlooked employee, smiling politely, typing notes, fading into the background of meetings that never remembered her name. But by night she became something else. When the office lights went out and the world slipped into sleep, Eliza came alive. Some ignored her. Some laughed. But a few believed, and those few became the first sparks of something bigger. Every message she sent, every tiny reply she received, was another brick in the foundation of her dream. Daniel thought it was a joke, but brick by brick, Leah was quietly building the very empire he said could never exist. The nights of exhaustion finally cracked into light. Months after she first began sending messages, Leah uploaded a story from a young writer who had nearly given up. It was raw, unpolished, and painfully human. Leah believed in it when no one else did. At first, it was just a handful of views, a few kind comments. Then something shifted. One share turned into 10. 10 turned into hundreds. Within days, thousands of people were reading that story, passing it along, talking about it. Leah watched the numbers climb from her dimly lit apartment, tears slipping down her cheeks. For the first time, her platform wasn't just an idea in her head. It had a voice people were finally listening to. Messages poured in. Other writers reached out saying, "Can you share my work too?" Readers sent notes like, "I felt seen for the first time." It wasn't money. It wasn't fame. But it was recognition. A whisper that told Leah she wasn't invisible anymore. And that whisper, carried by thousands of strangers, was starting to grow into an unstoppable echo. Recognition didn't erase reality. While her platform gained attention, Leah's life behind the curtain was still brutally hard. She owned only 2 pairs of shoes, both worn thin from walking miles to save bus fare. Her jewelry, the few pieces she had, went to pawn shops exchanged for grocery money. Some nights her dinner was nothing more than tea and dry bread. She'd sit by her glowing laptop, stomach growling, convincing herself that hunger was temporary. But her vision was eternal. Friends drifted away, unable to understand why she'd sacrifice comfort for something that didn't yet pay her bills. Even Daniel mocked her again. "You're starving for a dream that won't feed you." But Leah didn't argue. She let him laugh. Every skipped meal, every lonely walk through the cold night became proof to herself. Proof that her dream mattered more than her comfort, her pain, even her pride. Behind the screen, the world saw only the rising platform. They never saw the sacrifices carved into Leah's daily life. But those sacrifices were shaping her into someone who could carry the weight of what was coming next. After walking away from Daniel, Leah returned to her tiny apartment with nothing but a broken bank account and an unbroken will. Starting over wasn't a choice. It was survival. She reached out to the few writers who had stood by her through the chaos. Together they rebuilt line by line, story by story, without a cent to spare but with faith stronger than gold. Leah poured her voice into the platform this time, not hiding behind silence, but leading boldly. Every word she wrote, every story she amplified, carried the weight of her journey. Soon the platform wasn't just hers. It became a megaphone for thousands of unheard voices, echoing across the internet. Leah, once dismissed as voiceless, had become the loudest. And with every new writer who joined her, the roar only grew louder. What began as late-night typing under a dim lamp now roared across the globe. Media outlets called, investors lined up, and writers from every continent reached out to join her platform. What Daniel once dismissed as scribbles and daydreams had become a multi-million-dollar publishing empire. Leah's face appeared on magazine covers, her name trending online, her story told as proof that the unheard could rise. Yet every headline carried more than success. It carried the weight of her silence, the silence that once protected her when words failed. For the first time, the world wasn't just listening to Leah, they were listening through her, to the thousands of writers she had lifted, to the countless stories once left in the dark. Her empire wasn't built on money alone. It was built on the promise that no voice, however small, would ever be mocked again. Leah's silence once made her invisible. Now it's the foundation of a symphony the world can't ignore. Her journey proves that the quietest dream can become the loudest roar. And maybe the next echo belongs to you. Subscribe. Your story might be the voice the world is waiting for.